Well, welcome in everyone to Tiger Vision's weekly college football rundown show. I'm Jay Smith, and this is Bradley Kendall, and this is After Further Review. Hard to believe we're already in week 6. It is now October, so Bradley,
slow down.
Let's jump right into it after further review.
$1 million mishap, and I'm referring to LSU paying their $1 million man Ed Orgeron, and it's not getting its return. Let's just say that.
I like it.
We're not going to jump into the LSU Troy game specifically, but I will say LSU this season so far, the highest paid team that they've played, I guess in all of Division I.
Yeah.
LSU paid Troy the most amount of money to come play them, and they got an L. They took the L, so $1 million right down the drain for basically public embarrassment for the program.
Well, let's get into some more games that our audience may be interested in. Specifically, we'll start off with Miami and Duke. The Blue Devils coming into this game, I believe they were 4-0. It's their first loss of the season. Kind of an ugly loss. Miami outplayed them in just about every facet of the game, beating them 31-6.
Yeah, I think Duke's 4-0 record, they were not going to take Miami by surprise. That 4-0 record, kind of was a little alarming, and Miami took that pretty seriously. And we kind of saw that in the final score. 31-6, absolute beatdown from the very beginning. Malik Rozier had a great game for Miami. It was kind of his coming out party as the new quarterback of the Canes. Daniel Jones, very disappointing, a guy that people were talking about potentially as the 3rd or 4th round draft pick out of Duke, and just was not there. Got a little shift to reality for Duke in their program.
Well, I mean, Miami's defense played well,
Yeah.
and I think surprised this was an away game for Miami. It was on the road, a Friday night. Some may feel like that's a bit of a trip up, but Miami was able to handle it well. They're now 3-0. This was their first conference win, which gets them off on the right foot in the ACC. But, I mean, if you're Duke, yes, this game results in a loss, and there are some questions after this game, but I still, sitting at 4-1, you're 1-1 in the conference. I mean, when you're Duke, you're not playing for an ACC championship every year. Yeah. You're playing for a bowl game.
Exactly.
And at this point, the Blue Devils are looking like they may get a pretty decent seeding in the ACC for a bowl.
And, 4 wins back then was enough as for an entire season for them. But
and that just shows how much Cutcliffe has been able to change the program and the mentality at Duke.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in kind of a weak ACC Coastal, they can pick up a couple wins. You got UNC that they've already gone through. You got Wake Forest coming up. Georgia Tech will be a little tough. But there's definitely opportunity there. So I think this was good to see for Miami, though, especially as a rising contender in the ACC Coastal. Someone to keep an eye on, especially going into the next week against the Florida State Seminoles.
We'll jump into the next game. This was between Auburn and Mississippi State. This one also wasn't even close. Auburn beating down on the Bulldogs 49-10. What were some key takeaways from this one?
Mississippi State just still licking their wounds from that game right there, and then the week before that where they got trounced by Georgia. But really, Nick Fitzgerald just couldn't get anything going. Jarrett Stidham, the second week in a row, ESPN's rating him the most efficient quarterback in the country for Auburn. So I guess he's recovered well from the Clemson game, but really good for Gus Malzahn. Putting up 49 on an SEC defense like Mississippi State, who completely took LSU out of their game, was great to see.
And 21 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, they finished the game really strong. They were up 21-10 at the half, and they just did not look back. They shut out the Bulldogs during the second half. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned Stidham, and he went 13 for 16 for 264 yards, 2 touchdowns, didn't throw an interception, and then on the ground, Johnson was able to get over 100 yards rushing.
He is getting no love. Guy had 5 touchdowns last week against Missouri and 3 more this week against Mississippi State. So he's tearing through all these defenses.
Yeah.
And they got to keep an eye on him.
What's interesting, actually, in this game is looking at time of possession. The Bulldogs came away with 34 minutes of possession. Auburn only clocking in at 25 minutes, and they were still able to hang up 7 touchdowns.
Wow, with 244 rushing yards, do you think that would lead to a lot of time clicking off the board?
511
it looks like
total
Mississippi
yards
State just
for
stalled.
Auburn.
They just couldn't get anything going.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's tough to see. I mean, they really thought they had something going, ranked 14th in the country. But, Dan Mullen's still got to be happy at 3-2. But great for Auburn to be able to rise up.
So do you feel like it's a shallow win for Auburn? Do you feel like this was Mississippi State being exposed again? Or do you feel like Auburn is just that good, and that makes Clemson's win over them that much more impressive?
It makes it more impressive. They held them to only 50 yards in the second half against them, something like that.
Defensively was great.
Offensively, Auburn's really starting to figure things out. We knew they were a good defensive team, but Mississippi State just got a lot of troubles. I think that was mainly the highlight point of this.
Yeah. Next game, we're going to look at the upset of the weekend. Washington State, the Cougars. I know you called it.
Mike Leach's game.
Yeah, beat USC 30-27, and is Washington State for real?
I believe Evan McDowell also picked the game because he's going through the door cheering. I didn't consider this an upset. I really think going into a hostile environment, Friday night, USC is still trying to figure things out and get things going. It had an upset written all over it. Washington State, kudos to them. I mean, Luke Falk played the game of his life, 340 yards on 51 attempts. You can see how they like to shape their offenses through the air.
Yeah.
But the big question is just Sam Darnold. I mean, 164 yards, 15 for 29. what does he do going forward that is going to fix this? Because right now they're 4-1 and have no room for error.
Yeah, and they've had a lot of close games.
Yeah.
They easily could have lost to Texas. If
Yeah.
if USC was now 4-2, there would be
3-2. It would be.
I'm sorry, you're right. 3-2. There'd be a ton more questions. I mean, I get that they're still 2-1 in the conference, and a conference championship is not out of reach for them. But I kind of in the boat in the same boat with you, thinking that Darnold is not quite living up to the potential that he was hyped up to be at the start of the season. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Trojans drop one or maybe two more games if their
Yeah,
offensive performance doesn't improve.
You see right now the way that the conference is shaping out. You got both teams from Washington really standing above the rest of them. USC, it's an uphill battle from here. I mean, as we're looking at the conference standings, a one-loss Pac-12 team might not even make it into the playoffs. So if they have any chance to make it, they're going to have to really figure this out and in a hurry, because they're going to have to start dominating opponents if they want to even have a chance to make their ultimate goal, which would be the playoff. Yeah.
Next game we're going to look at, this one was not interesting, not even close. Of course, we're talking about Georgia and Tennessee. This was a beatdown. I know your brother's happy, Ryan, who's
he's
a Georgia
thrilled
freshman.
about this,
41-0, blanked Butch Jones at home. Peyton Manning was there. That was about the only highlight of the game. Is Butch Jones firing inevitable?
At this point, kind of like we talked about, who were we talking about before a couple weeks ago? I can't remember who. Maybe it was Butch Jones we were talking about, but he's just a lame. It was the guy from Nebraska. He's just a lame duck. He's got no faith around the program at all.
Yeah.
I honestly, when you said blowout, I thought you were talking about the Alabama Ole Miss game.
Yeah.
It's amazing this wasn't even the biggest blowout.
Could have been.
I thought something funny I saw today when they were talking about the odds for the coaches for next year if Butch Jones does get fired. Peyton Manning, 10,001 odds to be the next head coach of Tennessee. I would not say it's impossible at this point.
I mean,
being how desperate they probably are.
Tennessee's now 0-2 in conference play. They're 3-2 overall, and they haven't been shut out since a loss to Florida in 1994. I believe it was 31-0. So it had been. I'm reading this. Tennessee's most lopsided home defeat since a 45-0 loss to Vanderbilt in 1905.
Wow.
It has been 112 years since they lost that bad at home.
That's just
I just don't think Butch Jones is going to survive the
season. If he had any chance to stick around, which we already had some speculation he wouldn't, this does not help at all. I think it's even more amazing that if you look at Georgia's stats, Jake Fromm only 7 for 15, 84 yards, and they only had 294 rushing yards. So that's really what the bulk of their offense was. And a lot of question, is Jake Fromm or Jacob Eason going to be the starting quarterback? He's played well so far. So
rocky bottom for Tennessee. Rocky bottom. Last game that we'll look at from this past week, obviously, again, game of the week, Clemson, Virginia Tech. Tigers go in on the road, hostile environment, rowdy environment, and were able to score 10 points before Virginia Tech even got a first down.
Yeah, I mean, Virginia Tech, Bud Foster really prides himself on having a great defense. It seems like the stage was a little bit maybe too high for Virginia Tech. They really just came out kind of shell-shocked, I think.
Yeah.
I thought they were a little bit overrated to begin with at 12. We saw kind of what they really are like as a team. I think Josh Jackson played well. He had a couple key turnovers, like that Austin Bryant miraculous interception.
I understand the final score was a 14-point differential. Obviously, some people could argue that it was a 21-point. I still feel like, in my opinion, this game, even though it wasn't, I never felt concerned while watching it. It was still more competitive than the Louisville game. Yeah. The Louisville game really was a snooze fest, in all honesty. Like, it was not anything. It was never really entertaining or competitive or close. So I don't know if the stage was too big for Virginia Tech. I just am not sure if they were ready to face a caliber of defense like Clemson's, because we only scored.
Who is, though, to be honest?
Right, we only scored 31 points. So offensively, yes, I mean we played well, but like Dabo said in the presser today, and the coordinators reiterated too, this was the best performance defensively so far. I mean,
and
yes,
we keep saying that week in and week out.
Yes, they gave up that touchdown at the end of the game, but really they held Virginia Tech to 10 points. Yeah. And holding a team like Virginia Tech to 10 points when they're at home at night is a huge feat, regardless of what your offense produces.
But to say that we only played a mediocre game offensively and still were able to put up 31
yeah.
with a lot of room to improve, like Dabo was talking about, we left a lot of points on the board. I think it's kind of scary. I mean, if Clemson scores over 24, it looks like every game they're going to win.
Yeah.
So 31 will do
Good
it
argument.
for them. So.
Good argument. Well, now we will jump into 5 good questions. I believe it is my turn to ask the questions this week, so we'll go ahead and kick that off. First question. Should Butch Jones and Ed Orgeron swap jobs?
Swap jobs?
Should they do the old switcheroo?
Honestly, I think Ed Orgeron, the only chance he would have had to succeed at a big-time program was LSU, because he's a Louisiana man.
I agree.
I don't even think Butch Jones right now deserves a Power 5 job. I think there's a lot of
Wow.
I mean, maybe you could go out on a limb and say a team like Purdue or someone like that, like a
Okay.
bottom tier Power 5 team. But
Rutgers.
it doesn't seem like he's worthy enough right now as a coach. He really has not done much except for some miraculous plays last year that even got Tennessee to be relevant. So
No, they should not.
I don't think they should switch jobs.
I'm going to
man.
agree with you there. This is more of a silly question than anything. I think that Odron still has hope.
Yeah.
It's not good. There's not a lot of hope, but there's a little bit of light. I think Butch Jones is already on the way out.
I think the only thing keeping Orgeron in his job now is that $12 million buyout.
Yes, the buyout, the buyout is part of it, but I still feel like there's a little bit of the alumni or maybe the booster base that is holding out hope on Orgeron. And it may take them a while. They may realize that patience is usually the best policy, because if you look at schools like Texas, who have rushed through head coaches since Mac Brown retired, it hasn't worked out. So, maybe Orgeron will hang around for another couple of years. The buyout could have something to do with that. But, I think that both of these coaches could be fired by the end of the season. It wouldn't surprise me.
Hey, at least Troy showed that they could actually compete last year. So this isn't like a complete embarrassment. They almost did beat Clemson last year.
Well, the fact that they paid him almost $1 million is
and
like
then
you
they
said
just
at the start of the show.
Embarrassed him on Twitter as well. So.
Yeah.
But that certainly doesn't help.
Next question. Can Washington State crash the college football playoff?
Absolutely they can. I mean, we said USC was a top 4 team in the country, and Washington State outplayed them from start to finish. I don't see why not. I love what they're doing. Attacking through the air. Luke Falk, we've already seen one of the most proven quarterbacks in college football. Mike Leach has done this before. Texas Tech, he had him at number 2 in the country back in 2000, I think it was 8, something like that, back with Michael Crabtree. So the schedule looks pretty favorable going forward. And if they can get to that Apple Cup and have a chance to play their way in against Washington, I like their chances.
The Cougars' all-time record in bowl games is 7-5. So if they made it to the Pac-12 championship and or a playoff semifinal, those would easily be the biggest games in school history.
Oh, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. I do not disagree that they could crash the college football playoff and get in as one of the 4, but I'm going to have to throw the flag on them actually winning a game, because like we saw last
so
year.
making it or winning a game?
When I say crashing the college football playoff, I mean you're in it and then you upset somebody. And I don't think Washington State will be able to handle the magnitude of that game. It'll be the biggest in school history. It's like similar to Washington last year when they played Alabama. What was it last year?
Washington did, yeah.
Yeah, and they got throttled.
Alabama was so much better than Washington we saw.
They got throttled.
I know what you mean.
like Washington State. I think they have a chance to win a Pac-12 championship. And if they do, that's a huge building block for them. Huge. But they don't have a chance to beat another team like a Clemson, an Alabama, a Penn State, an Oklahoma.
You're matching up like Oklahoma, who has a similar style, the way
I
they
don't know if
attack
I could do
people.
that. No.
Well, I want to see how they go the rest of the season.
Oh, yes, for
so
sure,
they're not just
for
a
sure,
one-hit
for sure.
wonder. Then they'll be able to change my opinion.
Next question. This is a tough one right here. Ohio State, USC, Trojans, Oklahoma State, and Auburn are all 4-1. This is 4 different conferences. 4 different conferences represented. You got to pick one to get into the playoff. Who you got?
It's not Auburn. I think Georgia and Alabama are just too good right now.
Okay.
I'll go with Ohio State only because we saw they can go without winning their conference and still get into the playoff.
Yeah.
USC, they're just too shaky
Too many,
at this
yeah,
point.
too
There's just too many
inconsistent.
things
Too
going around
inconsistent.
their program. Oklahoma State, I think, has a good chance. I think the way that we saw that they're a one-dimensional team and they really can't play out of defense, TCU kind of exploited a lot of those things. I would go with Ohio State purely because it's Urban Meyer. They have their chance against Penn State, and they're not completely out of it. Their worst loss right now is their only loss to Oklahoma, which is a great loss. So
If Ohio State loses to Penn State, they're out.
then if it's a 2-loss team, then they're
okay,
done.
here's the problem for Ohio State in my mind. They're playing Penn State, they're playing Michigan State, who you can never really write off, and you're playing Michigan on the road. So for those 3 games, they're not going to win all 3 of them, and they essentially have to finish the season undefeated. And they, regardless of if they win their conference championship or not, they could still get in, like you mentioned. But for me, the safer bet is Oklahoma State. They're playing in the Big 12. It's a little bit of a softer conference. I feel like we talked about this at the beginning of the show's season. Big 10 looks like it's the best in college football right now.
We think
in terms
so.
of conference.
In terms of the top 10, they got 4 teams.
Right. So we're thinking the Big 10 is the best conference. So for that reason, Ohio State is out. USC is too inconsistent. I agree with the Georgia-Auburn mentality.
I think that game against Bama at the end of the year would
Georgia-Alabama for
tough.
Auburn. Right.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm going with the mullet, Mike Gundy, and the Cowboys.
But, okay, let me think about this. If TCU has already beaten Oklahoma State, and TCU finishes also with 1 loss, would they not get the
Who are they
edge?
going to lose to? Who are they going to lose to?
If they did lose. I guess because they take the top 2 teams, it doesn't matter because Oklahoma State would have to beat Oklahoma.
Right.
So I guess a lot of things are gonna have to fall into place for him.
Yes. Oh, yes, for sure.
But I do like what they do. I love Mason Rudolph. He was my preseason Heisman favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I'm high on the Cowboys.
I just think Ohio State has a lot more to gain with a tougher schedule. They have a lot more games they can play where they can showcase their chances.
It's an open-ended question, though.
It's tough.
It's tough.
But Ohio State and Oklahoma State, I think, are the top two, I would say. Yeah.
All right, number 4. This one's a doozy.
Oh, God.
Could Notre Dame make a run at the playoff? Does the Fighting Irish have a shot? Can Brian Kelly claim redemption?
No, they were 4-8 last year. Okay, I know Colorado went from like 4-8 to like 11-1. I'm sorry, Jack. They can't make the playoff. I know they played well against Georgia. That was on the road. That was Jake Fromm's first game as a starter. They're just too much in the way. I mean, you could say that's beneficial to them. Not having a conference championship, already have a loss. I can't say it.
If they're 11-1 and their only loss is to Georgia, who may or may not become the future SEC champion this season, then yes, I think they're a shoo-in. However, I think they're in if they're 11-1. They've got games home against USC. That's a rivalry game. You never know. NC State, who's looking pretty good this year. You've got Wake Forest, who has a great defense. You've got at Miami, and then you're finishing the season at Stanford. Of those 5 games that I listed, I think if Notre Dame wins 3 of them, that's impressive. 4 would be awesome.
Yeah,
so for that reason, because of their schedule, I don't think that they could do it. But if they were able to clean that slate, if they're able to knock off USC, NC State, Wake Forest, Miami, and Stanford, and their only loss is by 1 point to a Georgia team that beats Alabama in the SEC championship game, the Fighting Irish are back in the playoffs.
No conference championship game.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Your name is Notre Dame. Notre Dame's name recognition is...
If Notre Dame gets considered 11-1, that would be 5 conference champions plus Notre Dame vying for 4 spots. You'd have to go through and pick 2 other teams that you think Notre Dame is better than.
Okay, if Notre Dame finishes 11-1, all right, and their only loss is to Georgia by a single point, okay? If Clemson finishes 11-1 and wins the conference championship, let's say they play Virginia Tech again, and they finish the season 11-1, and they lose to an opponent from between now and the rest of the season. Well, that opponent that we're going to play is not going to be as highly ranked or as highly rated as a Georgia team. So if I'm sitting here and I'm comparing,
but it depends if Georgia has to win the SEC, I think.
I would agree. If you're sitting here and you have an 11-1 Clemson team that lost to Syracuse. Let's just say
that's a bit extreme.
God forbid. Well, Wake Forest.
How about Florida State?
Florida State, a team that should be 0-3. I'd pick the Demon Deacons to beat us.
State, let's think about them a little differently than every
regardless, let's say we lose to Florida State.
Or South Carolina.
Florida State. The point is that an 11-1 ACC champion Clemson, who lost to a team like that, would not get the nod over an 11-1 Notre Dame team, regardless of conference championship, because Notre Dame's only loss is by a single point to the SEC champion. I
still think Clemson's resume would be better than a lot of the one-loss conferences out there. If that's the debate we're making, maybe pick a different team, like compare them to Washington, who doesn't have as high of a schedule, or a Big Ten champion Wisconsin.
Okay.
Well,
it's
not going to happen.
We got to move on. Last question, really quick. Why do people still care about the coaches and AP polls? Why is there so much fuss right now in the Clemson media about Clemson not being number 1? Who cares?
I mean, I guess it does matter when it's very clear that the AP poll is skewed. I wish the playoff rankings started from the very beginning of the year so we could just wipe these polls out to begin with.
They need to restart every week. There's so many things wrong with the polls. Who really
I'm just glad they don't decide national championships anymore. Because
I'm just glad that Dabo and the team don't pay attention to that nonsense.
They shouldn't, but we can debate about it.
All right. Third segment now, and if Taylor doesn't mind queuing up those videos that we've got, that would be great. First topic that we're going to get into is Florida quarterback Luke Del Rio. Had that typo.
Jack Del Rio's son. So you were on the right track with
Luke Del Rio. He's out for the year with a shoulder injury.
Luke Del Rio making his first start for the Gators this season after being leapfrogged by Felipe Franks in the second quarter. About 5 minutes ago in the first half, Del Rio dropping back, completes the pass to Brandon Powell. That's an 11-yard gain, but the most important part is Luke Del Rio here. Takes a big shot, lands on his left shoulder where he had surgery on in the off.
So this is just one that goes down. It is tough though. Especially a team that's still trying to find their identity, and they seem to find it in Luke Del Rio. It's going to be tough going forward, but
it gives a younger quarterback a chance to step up and get in there, and they need a lot of work offensively.
They do.
Hopefully this, it's a good thing out of a bad situation. So we'll just kind of have to see.
I hate to say it, but it does narrow down their quarterback's decision now. Now they can only decide between 2 instead of 3. Yeah.
Next topic we're going to look at is out of NYU. Their linebacker, Austin Jones-Davis, he poked a San Diego State running back, Rashad Penny, in the eye after a tackle. I'm not sure if that's queued up. We got that video. Here he is holding his eye. You can see here on the tackle.
God, I mean, you know, the funny thing is, I don't want to say this is a funny incident, but the funny thing is, even after doing this, I guess this was the guy's intention of taking out one of the greatest running backs in the country right now. He still was able to break through for 139 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
and
didn't work, and he got suspended.
NIU actually suspended him. I mean, I agree. I think the guy should have been suspended after this.
What a cheap way to try and go after someone.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. That's not.
That just shows you now that there's cameras everywhere, and there's every angle is.
You got your golf shirt on, like golf. You capture everything.
That's right.
And this would have probably gone away with a couple years ago, but not now.
Oh, yeah. Back in the 80s or 90s, it would have been totally under the radar. Last segment that we're going to look at, USC player decks a Washington State fan when they were storming the field.
Check this out. Look at this.
And after
you see the
win,
guy towards the back and just gets absolutely right there.
Boom!
Gets
decked.
That was probably the hardest hit of the game for USC. Kind of sad to say.
Where's the concussion protocol? That's what I want to know.
Now, Washington State, the thing is, they got fined for this, for storming the field like this, which is kind of incredible.
I didn't know that the Pac-12 fined teams for storming the field.
And I guess this is kind of what they're referring to, was this is what they want to try to limit, is instances like this. But it's usually the other way around, where you got fans getting in the ways of the players and kind of pushing them around. This guy just was not having it.
Well, again, the quality of that video is pretty poor, and so you really don't know if the fan was taunting the player. I think that the player decked the guy.
If you're a player, that you can't do that.
I think the player decked the guy, but, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if that Washington State player was talking a little bit of smack and was standing in his way.
You're USC, and you just lost to a team that 5 years ago couldn't win a game.
Yeah.
So
I mean, for that, out in the middle of the field, there's people all around. I don't know what he was thinking. Clearly, the USC player was not thinking. Yeah. But you're right. That's
taking his anger out the wrong way.
Storming
take
the
it out of
field
the locker,
can be
man.
dangerous.
Don't take it out on a fan.
Yeah.
Like we said, cameras capture everything.
That's right. All right, well, we appreciate Taylor working everything out behind the scenes to get those videos to play for us. We're going to quickly jump into our college football playoff preview segment. Who you got in your top 4 this week?
Top 4 are exactly the same as I had last week. Clemson, I still got them at number 1. We talked about the debate with the AP poll. They got the best resume in the country. I think if the playoff rankings came out today, they would be number 1. 2, I got Alabama. I think they're on a record pace right now for outscoring conference opponents. I mean, they went from 51-0 against Vanderbilt to 66-3. Just absolutely embarrassing competition. Number 3, I got Washington. I saw a stat today. 1, 2, and 3, Clemson, Alabama, Washington are the top-rated teams offensive and defensive efficiency. So, I mean, I know Washington hasn't played to the competition that Clemson and Alabama has, but I love what Jake Browning's doing. Chris Peterson's a heck of a coach. Oklahoma did not play this week. I'm going to keep him at 4. Nothing to change my opinion otherwise. Georgia, I got at 5, though. They're on the outside looking in. You know, if Oklahoma struggles like they did against Baylor, I'll slide Georgia in.
My top 4, I'm going to agree with Clemson number 1. I think with the whole beating 3 top 15 teams in September has never happened. And, you know, just the way that Clemson's played, I understand Alabama's throttled their last 2 opponents. But I still think you have to give the nod to Clemson. They're the consensus number 1 in my eyes. Alabama at 2. I mean, again, another – I feel like those 2 teams have distanced themselves so far from the rest of the country.
Alabama fans are happy you don't have them at 4 like you did a couple weeks ago.
Well, the way that they played the last 2 weeks – they deserve that bump up. At 3, though, I got the Bulldogs. I think that it was really impressive going into Tennessee and shutting them out, completely shutting them out on the road.
Making a statement.
And every game I've watched, I've tried to watch every Georgia game this year, and every game that I've watched, I have been more and more impressed, both offensively and defensively, with the Bulldogs. And they scare me just as much as any other team in the country.
Quick question. Do you think now that Jacob Eason's back, do you make the switch back to quarterback, or do you ride with a hot hand? Do you stick with Jake from the freshman?
I would stick to where you're at. I think when you start subbing guys, like when you start switching guys around again, whether you like it or not, it divides the locker room a little bit, and you just don't want that tension. If you're riding hot, ride that wave.
This is like Dak Prescott and Tony Romo all over again.
A little bit. At 4, though, I got Penn State. Okay. I got the Nittany Lions. This was tough for me because I had at 5 I had Washington, 6 I had Washington State, and then 7 I had TCU.
I like that.
And
I like that.
I mean, those were all very deserving teams. Right now, I feel like their top three with Clemson, Bama, and Georgia are up here. I know that Bama and Clemson particularly have distanced themselves.
Yeah,
I think Georgia's
exactly.
got a pretty solid lock in the third slot. But for me, 4 is pretty. It could change week to week. I mean, Penn State, Washington State, TCU.
I think we've established their top 7 teams. Though.
Yes.
I think you and me both had similar stances.
And now
on
it
that.
gets interesting.
Now it gets
Now
really
it gets really
interesting.
interesting.
I cannot wait for that SEC championship game. If they stay the way they are now, that'll be fun. Yep.
Well, to go ahead and wrap up this week's show, we'll get into the Week 6 preview. The first game on the slate that we got over here right in front of me, number 17, Louisville at number 24, NC State.
NC State creeping into the rankings at 24. Louisville's actually favored this game on the road by 3.5.
Yep.
You know, the competition has not been there for Louisville since they got beat by Clemson. They had, I think it was, Murray State and Kent State that they played. So
Yeah, 2 cupcake games.
mentally, I mean, if NC State comes out strong, they may be kind of taking it back. But it is Lamar Jackson.
Lamar's got over 2,000 total yards this year already. He's got
Yeah.
18 touchdowns. He continues to put up great numbers. But NC State did beat FSU. But no game last year, Louisville won 54 to 13,
It was
I
a
believe.
complete beatdown. Yeah.
And that game was at Louisville. So you would think that this game being at NC State would help. But the problem for NC State, in my mind, is their secondary is rather weak.
It's getting killed.
And
Syracuse
Lamar,
exposed them.
yeah, if Syracuse can expose your secondary,
I mean, I know
there's problems.
Eric Dungy, I think the guy's name is. Their quarterback is a great quarterback
maybe.
in Syracuse. But that being said,
NC State's secondary is weak to the point where, I mean, it's
we've
bad.
seen Lamar can throw it now.
Yeah, and I think Lamar's going to burn them. I think that the only way the NC State has a chance is if they continue to put up points or they just play lights out defensively on the line. But this is a Thursday night game. It's away for Louisville. And so for that reason, I'm going with the Wolfpack. I think NC State's going to be able to get it done.
Listen, NC State, I appreciate them finally jumping into the rankings. It's been a while for them. Their win against FSU, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Knowles had a freshman quarterback.
Yes.
They were getting killed in the secondary, like we said, and Florida State had 3 linebackers get hurt in that game. So, I appreciate what they're doing now. I think Lamar's just going to be too much. It might not be 54-13, but it'll be close. I think Louisville's going to take it.
Next game up on the slate, I believe we have somewhere up here. We got the TCU Horned
I
Frogs.
don't have the TCU helmet, and I'm going to get it because if they're going to stay in our top 10, we're going to have them. Yeah.
TCU number 8 at number 23 West Virginia. TCU favored in this game by 12.5.
It's a lot.
Yeah, and they're going for their second 5-0 start in the last 3 years. They've won every game by double digits. But then you've got to go up against a guy like Will Grier on the road.
On the road, we saw how great he was against Virginia Tech, a good defense there. TCU, I love what they did against Oklahoma State. I think this game is going to be very close. Mm-hmm. Kenny Hill needs to just keep doing what he's been doing, and they've been rushing the ball like lights out. Darius Anderson leading the way. They're only averaging 18.5 points per game allowed on defense, which is great. So West Virginia is really going to have a lot more success and not turn the ball over because that killed them against Virginia Tech. They had that game won.
Well, I don't know if you mentioned, but West Virginia is allowing 451 yards per game.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a shootout.
I think it's going to be a shootout.
It will.
I think it's going to be a shootout. And if it's a shootout, I kind of favor TCU.
I do favor TCU only because they had a shootout against Oklahoma State, and we saw what they were able to do there.
Exactly.
So that's what I would go with. I favor TCU. Kenny Hill's hot. I'll go with them.
Yeah. All right, number 3, we got number 13, Miami at FSU. Miami's lost 7 straight to FSU, but I have a feeling that this could change this year.
I don't
Not
know.
confident. On a 1-2 FSU, that they should be 0-3.
Like last year, I think Miami's name and the fact they have Mark right now just carries way too much weight. They got beat last year when we were all saying, oh, Florida State's down, Miami's finally rising up to the level of the competition they need to be at. I think it's going to be 8 straight.
Miami is averaging 41 points a game.
But who have they played?
FSU is averaging 18 points a game. FSU is favored 63% in this game by FBI.
I usually
ESPN.
go shade away from the FBI, but I kind of agree with
blows
them.
my mind. Miami in a landslide victory on the road. It won't even be close.
It is Florida. Like we said again with the NC State game, Florida State so many injuries against NC State. Their quarterback was out against Alabama. They faced some really good defenses so far. That's why their numbers are so low.
Canes.
I'm going to go Florida State only because it's at home. Tomahawk.
Boo.
It'll be chopping.
4th game up on the slate we got over here in this corner. We got the Michigan Wolverines going on the road against the Spartans, Michigan State Spartans.
4 of the last 6 games have been decided, by 14 points or less. We saw the crazy ending a couple years ago with that blocked punt where Michigan State was able to come out victorious. Michigan State they're 5th in country in points per game allowed. A Michigan team that not only has been struggling on offense, but it's going to have to establish itself with a new quarterback now. John O'Corn, we've seen him before when Milton Spate was hurt. Spate's hurt again. Now, Corn has been good filling in. He has 28 touchdowns and 10 interceptions in his career. He did fill in against Purdue when they won that game. I think this is really going to be close. Listen, I have not liked Michigan all year. I really think this has upset written all over it because it's at Michigan State. I'm going to go with Michigan State in an upset.
I think this is a low-scoring game. Michigan's allowing only 13.5 points a game, which is best in the country, and I know Michigan State is 5th in the country in points allowed. So I feel like that this game is going to be a bit of a slobber, not a lot of field goals, maybe.
Yeah.
Not too many touchdowns.
A bloody nose game, like Dabo said against BC.
I still favor Michigan and khakis. I'm going with khakis. I just think that they'll be able to get it done on the road. I don't think they're going to let Michigan State stop them.
Michigan State's quarterback, we saw against Florida, they were a one-dimensional team. They could not run the ball.
They're hungry for the playoff, though. Michigan is hungry for the playoff. They didn't get there last year.
You can be hungry all you want, but if you can't move the ball on the field, it's not going to go well for you. Especially against a great defense like Michigan State. So I think I'm going to go upset.
Wow. Two not so fast, my friend, picks in a row. All right, last game to wrap it up. We got it dead center. The Clemson Tigers, number 2 in the country.
Should be number 1.
Wake Forest is the opponent. This week, we're favored by 3 touchdowns. Some key things to look at for this game. Wake is 1st in the country in tackles for loss. They've recorded over 50. I think they had 17 against FSU. And their offense has had its issues, but their defense, and Dabo said this, he mentioned this again in the press conference today, how physical they are. And so I think this could be the first game all season where you see the Clemson offensive line really challenged in the trenches.
And we saw how they struggled against Boston College and a little bit against Auburn, a team that has a great defensive line. That's really the Achilles heel for Clemson when it comes to protecting Kelly Bryant. When Kelly Bryant has a lot of protection, he's able to move the ball well. He feels so much more comfortable. When he gets under pressure, he starts to panic. Wake Forest, their line is stellar.
It is.
And they know what they need to do to get to Kelly Bryant.
Well, you mentioned protection, and in my opinion here, I mean, I know that their defensive line, Wake's defensive line is great, but I think that this is the game where Kelly really, if he's given enough time by the offensive line, he really needs to perfect that deep ball accuracy, and he needs to burn Wake's secondary. If he is able to neutralize Wake's secondary early into the game and then start establishing the running attack, the game will be over in a hurry.
That's exactly how Wake lost to Florida State. It was on a 40-yard bubble.
Right, but if Wake Forest starts getting to the quarterback, and we start having to run the ball more because Kelly doesn't have enough time to throw unless you're slipping one out to a screen. Then, Wake Forest might hang around for a little while.
Students need to show up, and Dabo said it today. They need to be. This is not Wake Forest's name does not carry a lot of weight. This team's good. They're a touchdown away from being 5-0 and probably ranked.
It'd be easier to show up if you could get a ticket.
I mean, I was at the game last year. Clemson really struggled. I mean, they had Deshaun, and it took them a while to actually get the ball moving.
There were a couple games last year. I know that we had a slower start to the season, but there were some games last year where Deshaun, took a while to get it going. But I think at the end of the day, Clemson takes care of this one at home.
3 touchdown favorites, probably a little high, but I think they still win. Probably around 17-ish.
It might be a lower scoring game, though, than we're used to seeing from Clemson. That's pretty much going to wrap it up, though, for this week's show. As always, we've enjoyed bringing you college football's latest news and highlights to you. For Bradley Kendall, I'm Jay Smith, and this has been After Further Review.
Thanks for watching.